Let's start with the disclaimer first. Hello everyone, in this video I will try to cover CI/CD basics. You might probably see this infinite loop about the CI/CD, and usually this infinite sign relates to our question, what does CI/CD mean? Of course, we can Google many pages and find answers, so it is continuous integration, continuous delivery usually, and you might see this infinite sign. Usually it relates to the pane with CI/CD linked. If we reuse some of the pictures first from the OPSMX, you will see that continuous integration is divided by two parts. CI, it is continuous integration when we building our code that we push it to the... So I will reuse this picture to explain it a little bit. Imagine that you joined a project or you started a project and DevOps teams or other team or somebody else already configured the whole infrastructure for the CI/CD. It means that we have Git repository, somewhere remote one, or you might have even Gerrit repository, it doesn't matter, GitHub even. So we have some remote repository, the central one, where we are pushing our code once we made something cool. So we would like to run specific set of instructions on top of it. For example, we want to build the code and we want to run tests on it if we have one, and do something else. So all these scripts that should be executed for new, can I say, part of the code, the new commit, new change, new merge request, new submit, whatever, it is part of the continuous integration job. So we write in instructions what we want to do when the new code has come, and then it will be part of the continuous integration. Usually continuous integration contains tasks related to the builds and tests. Build is obviously, right, compiling the code. Test usually contains different levels. It might be unit testing, it might be module testing, maybe something else. It depends on the organization, how they have decided to split these testing levels. When we are talking about the unit tests, it means that we have, for example, an application and 4 or 5 libraries in one repository. So unit testing unit tests will cover all libraries and maybe some part of the application. And then module testing might cover already compiled application with some additional script on top of it. For example, call an application with input parameters, then get output parameters from the whole module, and then compare the result with expected ones. Once it is passed, usually these binaries somewhere are uploaded. So first of all, you are passing the tests. Second one, once you merge the code, the build binaries, which are called as artifacts, they will be uploaded somewhere. And then they might enter into CD part, which is continuous delivery. With the continuous delivery part, you might enter into the more set of tests. For example, when your module will be integrated into the system itself, where it should be used. And then you will have end-to-end testing. For example, if you pass all tests, then your binaries will be marked as tested or verified, and they might be uploaded somewhere, for example, in Artifactory or any other storage with artifacts. And then you might have additional job running, which will fetch the new added artifact and then sign it with, let's say, production key or maybe development key. And then if you have more scripts, then you can forward it and send to production servers, or you might send it to the customer servers. It depends. So continuous integration is covering builds and tests. Continuous delivery or continuous deployment, it depends. It is covering additional set of tests, signing off artifacts, deploying it somewhere on Artifactory storage or maybe even customer or production places. That's what I would like to cover about the CI/CD. Now let's take a look how Git and CI/CD are linked between each other, or how do they communicate between each other. So imagine that we have Git repository plus hosting system, and in our case it might be GitHub, it might be Gerrit, it doesn't matter, to be honest, it is just some hosting system. So we have two options. The first one, you as a developer, for example, submit new commit to the repo. And imagine that we passed it. So we have new commit added into the Git. It might be GitHub, it might be GitLab, Bitbucket, it might be Gerrit, or it might be DevOps, or how to call it with Microsoft, doesn't matter. So once it is added into the Git, usually the Git will call a webhook or maybe will send an event to the CI/CD service that, hey, I have a new event. For example, I have a new commit. Usually you have a new event. Imagine that it is a new commit. Then CI/CD service is listening to events from our Git hosting system. And once a new event has come, for example, a new commit, then it will react on it. Or it might react on the webhook. It depends on the configuration. So the first way is when we do something. For example, we send the commit to Git, then Git will send an event to a CI/CD service, let's call it a service. So it is the first way. Second way is when we as a developer send the new commit to the Git hosting system, and Git is sort of passive. It is just waiting. It doesn't do anything, just existing. But then we have CI/CD service, and then we have a sort of infinite loop which is waiting for some period of time and then periodically polling the Git, for example, hey, do you have any news for me? And then Git can say, yeah, sure, I have a new commit, check it out. And then CI/CD will start a job which will poll a new Git commit, then do some additional work. So we have two options. The first one, Git is kind of informing CI/CD about new events, and it is commonly spread functionality because it is quite easy to implement and use. Or we have a little bit old version when Git doesn't do anything, but CI/CD is asking Git, hey, do you have any news for me? It depends. Both options are existing, but quite commonly you will face the situation when Git is informing somebody, for example, by a webhook, because it's quite easy. Once something has happening on Git, then it will just call through the webhooks and new services about it, like, hey, I have something here, I have something here, I have something here, I have something here. And let's take a look at the flow when we have this approach with notification or CI/CD. Quite often when a new commit has come to the main branch, so we have submitted a new change in Gerrit, we made, for example, a merge request, merge it into the main branch or something similar, then CI/CD is somehow informed. In our case, it might be, for example, that either Git will calls webhook, or Git can send an event. Usually it is a REST API. So it is somehow communicating to the CI/CD tool and say that, hey, I have new commit. Can you imagine that? New commit. And then CI/CD tool will trigger the pipeline or pipeline script depending on the configuration. And then what it does, usually with the new commit, you have a new information about it. For example, you have SHA, or you have this checksum of it. So you have some commit hash, you have commit name, whatever. You have this information about the commit. Usually you have extra information as well, like hash of the commit. With Gerrit, you might get the target branch, date when it was created, author of the commit, for example, who was reviewer, and etc. Then CI/CD will trigger the configured pipeline, will download, or this revision information about the commit will be received through this information from the Git that was sent to the CI/CD tool. Then, during the pipeline script, quite often, CI/CD will communicate towards Git repository and will clone the repo. Or maybe it will check it out on the specific revision. It depends on the configuration, because sometimes you might have a cached version of the repo, sometimes you might have already made copy to save time and space of the traffic and etc. So there are different methods, but you check out the specific revision which was specified on this message that I have a new commit. Then it is executing, the pipeline executes the specified script, usually stored in one of the files where all steps are described. Then if script has failed, or maybe it is succeeded, it depends. For example, everything is good, so we are happy, imagine. Then we will report the status. For example, it is okay, and everyone is happy about it. Or if, for example, build is failed, tests are failed, something happened, I don't know, maybe a network issue and etc., then we will get error about it and we will be sad, but we will know about it as well. So imagine that everything goes good, so we trigger it, the pipeline, then we check out the specific region, download it, specify it all. So we did this, we executed the script, we have built our code, run tests, everything is good, and then we have additional settings to upload artifacts. It means that, for example, we have some binaries created and we will just pack it as an archive and upload it to somewhere. So it will be a part of our CI/CD part. That's how Git and CI/CD are working. The question is, what is the artifact? Artifact in our case is the binaries or documentation or files created during the execution. So we have built an application with 4 libraries, and if we mark them that we want to upload them and provide to someone else, for example, to customer, to another team, to someone else, then we can call them as artifacts. We might have the pipeline which is generating only documentation, and then we want to upload this documentation to somewhere. That will be called artifacts. So artifacts of the job, usually it is set of files that we uploaded after the job executed. For example, if we have linters and static code analyzers and they are generating reports that we would like to upload as well, then these reports will be called artifacts. So it is artifacts, it is a set of files which is uploaded as a result of the pipeline. So what is the delivery then? Usually under delivery means that we take the artifacts that we would like to provide to our customer or to next element in our chain, and we uploading these artifacts. So delivery will be that we are packaging our artifacts that we uploaded. So we are packaging it into zip, for example, and upload to the customer and saying, hey, there is our new files. So it will be our kind of delivery. Let's talk a little bit about the GitHub Actions. I want to start with GitHub Actions because it is really easy to create and configure it. You don't need to do something special with your repository on the GitHub. You just create a repo, you just write a small configuration file, and then you will have the CI pipeline out of box. So you don't need to have Jenkins, you don't need to have anything else. It is enough to have an account on the GitHub, repository on the GitHub, and configure the actions. GitHub Actions, it is also a pipeline. Most likely it is a CI pipeline, so you can build and run tests, but you can also configure it to make it as a CI/CD, so you can also deploy some artifacts somewhere if needed. So GitHub now is sort of ecosystem which contains not only Git repository hosting system, but also CI/CD functionality in one place. That's nice. But then, what is this guy? What is the Jenkins? Jenkins is quite useful CI/CD tool, and it is famous due to its, I think it is open source, it's the first thing. Second, it is highly configurable, so you can configure it to use for different projects, different languages, different configurations. You can run it in a different places. It is really, really cool tool. Quite often, if you have some custom Git instance, or can I say Git hosting system, then you can easily configure Jenkins to run pipelines. I have mentioned it several times the keyword the pipeline. Usually under pipeline we mean set of actions that we need to perform from the code that we have posted on the Git repository towards end goal. For example, to upload build results, or to store artifacts somewhere, or maybe upload artifacts to the production server, and etc. So it is our set of activities. So it is our pipeline. Since I talked about the pipeline, I guess that it will be nice to have a couple examples. And so we have our awesome project in Gerrit, and I upload it on the GitHub. So what I will do, I will add here GitHub Actions. So I will add the GitHub implementation of the pipeline into the same repo, and I will try to replicate the same steps that we have in the Jenkins. And I will try to do it in the background, and I will return to it back. All right, all left. Okay, so according to this quick start for GitHub Actions, it is stated that we should create a folder GitHub workflows, so workflows folder inside .github in our repository. Then inside this folder, we create any file with YAML or YAML extension. We can name it absolutely differently. It's no problem. And then we can write down the list of the commands that we would like to do. And once it is done, then we commit it and push to the branch, and it should trigger our job. So let's see. So this is what I have written inside the GitHub folder workflows. I have created GitHub pipeline YAML, and for the references I was using Jenkins file. So in the Jenkins, I said that our pipeline contains that I will grab any agent. I don't care what agents do we have, just any. For the options, I set timeout for 10 seconds. And then within stages, only one stage is happening, and it is example. And inside this stage, we perform the following steps. We want to just echo the message hello world. What about the GitHub pipeline? We name it, for example, GitHub pipeline. Then run name will be probably something similar. I have no idea, but we will check. Then here on, it means that we want to trigger this pipeline on specific actions. And if you press comma, you will see here some actions. Let's say on create, on delete, on deployment actions, discussions, fork, issue comment, issues, label, merge group. So there are some options to add, for example, on issue comment and etc. But we will stop with just push. So it means once we push it, the git commit to the GitHub, then this job should execute, or this pipeline should start. And pipeline contains from the following jobs. So far it is just one, and it is build and test. It is the name and job ID of the job. So it is running on Ubuntu latest. We can use already created and working inside GitHub with some limitations. You can check it on the GitHub, or you can also install runner on one of your machines and connect it to the GitHub account and specify it here as well. And then we have steps to execute. In our case, it is just run echo command hello world. So let's commit it and push it to GitHub and see what will happen. As you can see, I do it in the same repository. We have the change ID. I just want to show you that it is not affecting of the work for the GitHub. I have added here the remote repo, which is called GitHub. So to push the commit, I will call it just git push GitHub main, or what is the brand? Yeah, main. So we will just call it this command. So the difference from the Gerrit and GitHub, it is obvious. So you can see that the commit was pushed. But now I would like to do it for the Gerrit as well, and it will be a little bit difficult now. It is just, we will call it as git push origin head refs for main. So you see the difference. We have git push, then for the GitHub, since I have two remotes now, two remote repositories, I specify the GitHub one, and then git push GitHub main. For the Gerrit, I need to specify that I want to push, but I want to push the commit which head is pointing to. So head is the cursor of the commit. In our case, it is this commit in our history, our current commit. So we want to push this commit that we have for as a reference for the main branch. So we push it as well, and we have it successful. So no problems to push it for GitHub and for the Gerrit. Now let's check the GitHub and see what will happen. So we go to the created project, update the page. We see that we have tab actions. So we click here. We see that in workflow we have one. So GitHub pipeline, we go here. Open it. We see that we have job which is called build and test. So if we click on it, waiting. While we are waiting, we can also check the Jenkins. So in the Jenkins, let me open it. You see that we have GitHub workflow here, and you see that it's already code review +1 by Jenkins. So the Gerrit works a little bit different. I will show you the configuration for Jenkins as well. But is it done? Is it done yet? Waiting. Well, I will wait for this build, but while we are waiting, maybe I can go to the Jenkins and explain it a little bit differently how it works. So Jenkins and Gerrit, how does it work? There are two options how to connect Jenkins and Gerrit. The first one is the plugin which is called webhooks. This plugin allows to propagate Gerrit events to remote HTTP endpoints. So we add this plugin in our Gerrit instance. In the description of this plugin, you can see the plugin per project configuration is stored in the webhooks.config file in project's refs metaconfig. I told about this branch before. So there is the branch which stores, this branch stores access and some configuration per projects, and it is inheriting, or can I say it goes from parent to child projects. As I mentioned previously, refs metaconfig is a specific branch for Gerrit repositories which stores access for the repository, and usually child projects which inherit access and some other rules from the parent project will also have these configurations. So if we configure the root or parent project to send events to specific repository, then child projects will have the same settings. It might sound a little bit complicated, but it is quite easy to understand. So if we use the plugin, which is called webhooks, then we need to add into the branch refs metaconfig specific configuration. For example, for the remote, we will call URL, and we have some settings that we can pass into it. In that case, when we create a change or we do some Gerrit event, then it will send it to Jenkins, and Jenkins can react on it. But there is another option that I would like to show you in this instance where I have admin privileges. If you go to the settings for the Jenkins, there are plugins. So for example, I have installed a plugin which is called, in this Jenkins instance, I have installed two plugins which are called Gerrit Code Review and Gerrit Trigger. So I have configured them, as you can see here, Gerrit Trigger, to connect to the Gerrit Jenkins setup Gerrit, which is running in the Docker setup. And you can see the status is connected. So in the settings, you might see hostname, front URL, SSH ports, how to connect to it, and then settings what to send. When we have, for example, successful job or unsuccessful or unstable. Then here are some additional configurations, for example, what labels or verdict categories we should send to it, and etc. This Gerrit trigger connects to the Gerrit. So what is happening? That one Gerrit has issued one of the events. Jenkins is being notified by it. I'm not sure for 100% how does it work. I think that, so I will show you one interesting thing. I have it. Here I have created a Gerrit change, and you can see here the message. Gerrit has received a new change, and once it received it, Jenkins. So you can see here that Gerrit has received for the awesome project from the developer a new change. Here, the new one. Then I think that Jenkins, I think that once, yeah, I think what is happening that we have Jenkins connected to the Gerrit via webhook. So once Gerrit has received the change, you can see in these two selected lines, then it is calling Jenkins about it, and you can see here that there is something new. Project list from Gerrit Jenkins setup contains 3 entries. Then Gerrit is receiving this information and call the hook for it, and then Jenkins reacting on it. And after Gerrit has received it, then it is calling the Jenkins by, so as you can see here on these lines, these two and these two, we have received a new change from me as a developer, and the hook is called. So to check that we are fulfilling all prerequisites. For example, we have change ID, we have it format, we don't have problems with access, etc. Then Gerrit here, finishing processing it, and also calling Jenkins or propagates an event. And then the plugin on Jenkins, which is this Jenkins, is called from Gerrit, because we have a webhook inside the Gerrit, which is saying, hey Gerrit, if you have anything new, please ping me, and then I will react on it. So Gerrit pinged Jenkins with event that patch set created with new change ID and some information. And Jenkins reacted on it according to the settings and started a new job for it. So let me show you. And what has happened for the user? We have uploaded the new patch set. Gerrit notified Jenkins that new change or new patch set has come. Jenkins created a job with number 17. Here is it. So once it is, you can see the triggered by Gerrit, and it is the same link as here, sort of. So if we go to the console output, you can see that it is triggered by Gerrit. And then, first of all, here we are, during these steps, we send a command to Gerrit to add the comment that build started and link to the build. Then the execution, then the pipeline is executing the script which is specified in, let me show you, in the Jenkins file. In Jenkins files, we are saying, I would like to run a pipeline on any agent with options on the timeout, that we have 10 seconds timeout, and I would like to run only inside the stages, one stage which has a name example with steps echo hello world. Okay, so we go to Jenkins and we see that here this part is checking out or cloning the repository. Once it is done, you can see the message here, start of pipeline. So we are starting to execute our pipeline. Here it is stated that we're running on the Jenkins agent with specific name. Once it is started, we start our stage. So firstly, we clone our repository. So here we started pipeline. Now we clone the repository to the current change or current revision. You can see here we have check out the revision. Let's double check. We have this number F6EA here, F6EA. We can double check the commit message at GitHub workflow, at GitHub workflow. So from this point, at this stage, we started the pipeline, we cloned the repository, and we check it out the specific revision. Now we can do all other stages. Now we set the timeout. You can see timeout set to expire in 10 seconds. We start our stage example, and then we run the message echo hello world. We have it here. And then since it is end of the pipeline, we finish it, all of them. And since there is no errors, it is finished with success. And since it is finished with success, we have the message from Jenkins that build successful and link to the Jenkins job with status success. If we have the failure or unstable, it will be here indicated, and then we will have another mark. The number, this code review +1, is configured in the, if I can show you, in the Gerrit trigger, in the configuration for the specific server, as I show it you here. So we have Gerrit reporting values, so we can set for the verify label some values and for the code review some values. Since I haven't configured the verify value, I just specified the code review. That's why I can set, or Jenkins set +1, and if it is failure, then it will be -1. We're still waiting for the runner on the GitHub. Okay, that's not our problem, it is GitHub's problem. I told you about two types of the communication. So we either use Gerrit trigger plugin or we use this webhooks plugin, but then you still need to configure the pipeline in Jenkins. While I am talking to you about it, let me go back. Imagine that we have this job number 17, which successful. But what if it is failure? Or if we go to the console output where you can read a little bit more information. By the way, if you see that it is cutted, for example, you have just part of the console output, you can always click view as plain text, and then you will get it fully. be careful, because if you have really long output, then you will have this document like really big. So be careful with it. So if you want to check the output, like how was it done and etc., I would strongly recommend to check console output. It is really informative. You will see here what is happening. Quite often you see that it is, for example, something related to the communication, something related to the test cases running, something related to the agent itself, maybe network instability. So please check the console output. It is quite interesting. Now, two important moments. We have retrigger button, as you can see here, and we have replay button. We also have restart from stage. Usually restart from stage means that we would like to run this pipeline from one of the specific stages. For example, imagine that you have 5 stages: build, test, build, test, and upload. Okay, three stages: build, test, upload. And upload has failed due to network issues. So then you can click on the button restart from stage and you choose the stage name. For example, we would like to restart from the stage uploading and then try to upload it again. In that case, all information from this build will be sort of restored, and the pipeline or Jenkins will try to repeat actions from that specific stage. If you would like to know information, for example, information about the build, usually you might get build data. Here you will have more information, or also, so we have covered the restart from stage. Now imagine that something has happened with the agent, or maybe network issues has happened, and you would like to retrigger the job because something is fishy. So you can click on the retrigger, and by button retrigger, you can see the message done. It means that you have started the same, the job with number 18 on the same Gerrit change. If you check the status and update it, you will see that Jenkins has started another job and finished it. So on the same change. It is sometimes needed in case if you have an issue with, let's say, Jenkins setup, or maybe agent setup, or maybe network issues, maybe hardware issues. Something has happened which is not related to the code that you are running. Then retrigger might help. But imagine that you would like to, I don't know, for example, you are writing a Jenkins file to update the configuration, and you see that it is failing due to wrong syntax, and you are not sure is it correctly or not. Then, if you have an access to it, you can click replay button, and if you press on it, it is stated that allows you to replay a pipeline with build with a modified script. And here, what you can do, you can see that the content of this script is the content of the Jenkins file. So you can modify it. For example, you want to add another line, let's say hello world 2. One moment. Imagine that you type it here, something like that. Sometimes you might see here a red cross on the line. Let's try to move it outside of steps, for example. Sometimes you might see here red cross. It means that Jenkins has checked the content and said that it is not allowed to use it, but it doesn't work for me. So if you see accidentally that you have a red cross on the line, please check it out, because Jenkins can parse this script and tell you that it is a syntax error. But imagine that we want to replay this job, but with different commands in the Jenkins file, because we want to add additional steps. Or let's say we want to add additional stage. Yeah, that's another option. So we're adding stage 2. Let's call it example 2. And here we will have echo hello world 2. So we want to add additional stage, but we're not sure will it work or not. So we click run, and what is happening, you can see that it is running, that it is replayed the job number 18, so it takes almost all parameters from the job 18. It is what revision to build and what repository to take, but it will execute the modified pipeline. And you can see here that we started 2 stages, hello world and hello world 2, and we have even 2 of them. That's quite interesting. If we go back to the project, you can see that we have added the new stage. So that is a difference how to start the job in Jenkins. You might by the way, and you can see that in the replayed job, you don't have a button retrigger because it was replayed, so it has a different content of the Jenkins file. If we go to the job number 18, retrigger means that we want to use the plugin and we want to retrigger the whole job for the change. Retrigger means that Jenkins will take all information for this job, will start it from the beginning, will notify Gerrit that build has started, and will perform all actions. Quite often it means that I want to sort of restart the pipeline from scratch. Restart from stage means that we want to restart this job, but from one of the stages that we have. For example, we have 3 stages, we want to start from second one. Replay means that we want to modify the script for this particular pipeline and then run a pipeline according to the new modified script. Important note, the modified script, for example, if we go to the line number 19, this script that we have written, it is not saved anywhere. So it is temporary changes. It will not be stored in the Gerrit. If you want to store it, you can create a new commit for it. So if you want to modify it temporary, just for run it once, you can use replay button. If you started the job and it takes some time, you can always, there is like a button usually cancel, so you can cancel it. And unfortunately, I can do it. So look, I click replay. For example, we have stage 2, then we do here, let's do stage, we call it, for example, sleep. And we do here sh, sleep 1 minute or 60 seconds. So we want to sleep for 60 seconds on the stage sleep, obviously. Run it. And you can see that we have build 20 and you can see the progress. So right now in the console, it is sleeping. So you can click here, cancel. It is asking, are you sure? We click yes. And then 2 options. You have here either, timeout has been exceeded. Awkward, few seconds, pipeline, timeout, let's set it to 100 seconds, run again. We have 21. So it is running, we sleep 60 seconds, we click cancel, because we don't want to wait for it, we click yes. And sometimes here you might get a message that waiting for canceling, and then you might click here like force to cancel, might be also. By the way, all interactions that we are doing here with Jenkins will probably send here. No, that's good. Yeah, so to cancel the job, by the way, I can show you the option we restart with stage. So we click here and we choose example or sleep, run. You can see that we have 22 and the message already sleep 60. So repeat. If we want to cancel the job, we click on the progress, cancel. And then you see that it was cancelled or aborted by us. That's it about the retrigger, rebuilding, replaying, cancelling. Console output, I mentioned it already. One of the things, now let's talk a little bit how it was configured. If you have an access to the configuration, usually you can see that we have the project, and inside the project you might have the button configure, or maybe you can see the changes inside this project configuration. You can ask someone with access to show you the configuration, but it looks something similar to some description of the job. For example, imagine that we have some description updated. So if we go to awesome project, you can see that we have our description here. So configuration. We have a description for a project. We have some configuration for jobs. For example, we don't want to have concurrent builds in the parallel. We want to cancel others. And here, everything else is usually configured per project. So in my case, we parameterized it with Gerrit ref spec, ref name, then patch set revision. I just want to have this as a 3 parameters. Build triggers, it might be Gerrit event, it might be Gerrit trigger. Here some additional settings. For example, our Gerrit trigger should be for the specific server, which is listened to. It should be triggered on, as you can see here, exclude private changes and VIP changes. So if we have our change and we mark it as work in progress or private, then Jenkins will not react on our changes. But if we changed it to, for example, as active or not private, then it will react on it. So it is quite useful configuration. For the Gerrit projects, we can say, for example, what projects we want to react on or listen to, because we want to react for one particular project, not for all of them. Sometimes we want to react on a set of the projects, then you can use regular expressions, but then you will need to have sort of generic Jenkins file, but it is a bit complicated. So quite often you have Jenkins job configured per project. It's easy to configure. You can configure it for specific branch or for set of branches. You can do it for the GitHub as well. As you can see here, there is a poll SCM. That's what I was referring to, that you might either be called from SCM, or you can periodically poll SCM. Do you have anything new? Do you have new branches? Do you have new commits? Do you have something else? So there are options. And the pipeline. So here the most interesting part is happening. We can select the pipeline script and write it here. So it means that we will store the script for this particular job inside Jenkins. Or we can choose pipeline from script. So if we choose pipelines from script, then we are saying that we want to check out the repository. In our case, it is awesome project, by using specific credentials for it. And then we want to check out specific branch, of course. And we specify that we want to use particularly this Jenkins file that we have in our repository. So for example, if I go here quickly, what I'm saying that once we created change in Gerrit with something, then please download the repository awesome project, check out that specific revision that we have, and inside this revision, execute Jenkins file. Then Jenkins will create a job, check out the revision. So let me go back. So if we go to line 18, so Jenkins will create a job, number something, will say that it is triggered or retriggered, and etc. We'll run it on one of the agents. Then we'll clone the repository on the specific revision. Then we'll read the Jenkins file on this revision, and then we'll execute the pipeline mentioned on the Jenkins file. That's a flow of the Jenkins and Gerrit, for example. If we take a look at the Jenkins here, you can see that it is written in Groovy sort of format, but it is declarative. You can also have the script pipeline. You can Google it. On the quick search, you can find that in the declarative pipeline, we are writing, for example, pipeline, agent, stages, and then steps, and you define steps inside. Or you can use also scripted version when you are writing almost everything in the Groovy script. There are pros and cons of each of them, and declarative is a little bit better in case if we want to have predictability, or we want to have, can I say, sort of waterfall execution, when we check first the syntax, and if syntax correct, we just execute command line by line. If we take the scripted version, it will be, I think it will be Groovy interpreter, and then we will have a little bit different execution, because scripted version will also check like on the execution, is it correct object, or is it correct operation, and etc. So it is a little bit fluffy explanation, but it is matter of choice what type to use, declarative or scripted. Quite often people are using declarative pipeline, because then you have unified syntax across the projects. If we use scripted, then it started, someone is using one style to write script, another guy using another style for scripting, so there are some pros and cons. But it is the same way to describe what we want to do with the code. By the way, no updates. While we are waiting for this 36 minutes. Okay, the common issues, usually. Imagine that our build has failed due to some reasons. It is failed. For example, let's say I will click replay it, and I will type here. Imagine that I accidentally has written here some line in the steps print and jump hello, which is obviously doesn't exist and it should fail. So I click run and you can see that job 23 is executing somehow and it is failed. So you can see that started, replayed, it is failed. So the question is, it is failed. Shall we retrigger it? Shall we restart it? I would recommend to check the console output. For example, if you check the console output, you see workflow script, expected a symbol, and then you see that it is failed, something similar to it, and then usually it is pointing to something. It means that Jenkins file or syntax or script inside the Jenkins file is not correct. There is no meaning to restart the job or retrigger it. There is a meaning to replay it. And by the way, if you click right now replay to modify it, since it is not correct syntax, you will get this message. You see, there is empty text. So since the syntax was not correct, you are not allowed to rewrite it again or replay it. So to go back to it, I would recommend to go to the failed job, check what was replayed, for example, line 22, go back, and then click, for example, replay and modify it. In case if it is failed, let's say due to a build execution, then I would strongly recommend to go to the console output and read a failure. If it is stated here that you have network issues, you have let's say if it is in cloud and one of the nodes is not allocated and you have a timeout, then I would recommend to either retrigger job or restart from stage. In most cases it is fine to click for example retrigger. So short recap, build failed, what shall I do? First, click on the console output, view as plain text or just like that, and check what is the error message. So if it is network issues, it is some issues which are not related to your changes, to your code, to code itself. For example, something happened with the infrastructure, network, etc. Then I would recommend to click retrigger. If you see that your code has failed due to linters, testing, due to changes that you have added. To be honest, it is the same as running compiler again and again and again, hoping that compiler will excuse you some mistakes in the code. There is no meaning to click retrigger. You will just get probably the same error, most likely. In that case, I would recommend to change the code first and see that it works. An exception, if you are modifying the Jenkins file, then go to the replay and try to write another script that you want to add into Jenkins file. Double check that it works by running the pipeline. If it works, then update the commit. That's basically it. I hope that I have covered some basics about the Jenkins and Gerrit. I hope that I showed you how it works. More interesting stuff can be recorded a little bit later once I collect the topics to cover. For example, how to upload artifacts and download them, and etc. Unfortunately, Github Actions has some issues. And while I was recording the ending of the video and I was saying goodbye and etc., I decided to check the GitHub and I clicked cancel, then click rerun, and voila, we have a GitHub pipeline. So you can see that GitHub Actions read this YAML file that we have pushed from this folder. Then you can see that it was on push. Right, it is created a job which is called build and test. So you can see it is here, build and test. And inside build and test, you see that we have set up a job stage when we run a specific runner. Operating system is Ubuntu, the latest one. Then there are some configurations, basically the configuring the runner for it. Then we have steps and it is run echo hello world. And you can see here we executed this command, we got the message hello world, and the job was completed. Finally it is here. But now you can see similarities, if I can say so. I can move it here, and you can see that we have a Jenkins file. When we are setting the pipeline on any agent, we can configure options. But basically we are saying that we have stages. In our case, it is just stage example, and we want to perform steps like echo hello world. In GitHub Actions, we also configuring the pipeline. We are saying that we want to react on it somehow. We configure the job, which is called build and test. We want to run it on Ubuntu latest, so there is a difference. And we want to perform steps. In our case, just run the command echo hello world. So differences not that many, to be honest, functional wise. Of course, there are some difference for the platforms, but the principle is the same. Or can I say the idea that you are defining set of stages. And then once a new commit has come, or once new change has come, then CI/CD is reacting on it, checking out the file with sort of instructions and performing them step by step. Now that's it what I would like to cover in this video. Thank you so much for your time. Bye.